Our next person, we have a couple named Adelle and Ernest Hartwell. Will you come up, Mr. Hartwell? No, he is.
I thought he was back. He's not back.
I don't worry about it.
Yes, please. No, don't do that.
Mr. Hartwell, you'll be sworn in first. Madam Clerk, Miss Godot. We're waiting for Godot. Another erudite person in this room, I can tell.
There's only two of us here.
There's only two of us, three of us.
Before Mr. Hartwell begins, I'd just like to put a few documents into evidence.
While you're doing that, I'd like to ask Mr. Hartwell the few basic questions that we're asking every witness. Mr. Hartwell, you are Ernest Hartwell, sir, right?
Yes.
All right. Are you appearing here today and testifying under oath voluntarily?
Yes.
Have you been paid by anyone for your testimony other than expenses for coming to Clearwater?
No.
Do you have a lawsuit against the Church of Scientology?
Yes.
Does the Church of Scientology have a lawsuit against you?
Yes.
Yes to both questions. Has anyone suggested to you that you should state anything but the truth, or has anyone suggested that you change your testimony for any reason?
No.
Mr. Flynn.
Exhibit 34, 36, is a policy letter of the Church of Scientology from the executive series entitled Governing Policy. Could we put that on the overhead projector, please?
Move that ahead. Straight up.
How many, just for the information, how many do you have?
I'm going to put 2 on the projector and introduce 4.
Okay.
As you can see, this policy states at the top, governing policy. The governing policy of finance is to, A, make money. And then going down to J, K, and L, it says make money, make more money, make other people produce so as to make money. Copyright L. Ron Hubbard. Copyright is in the lower left-hand column below the... It's further down on the... right at the bottom.
There you go. Always 72.
And Exhibit 37 is a document entitled List of Services, Church of Scientology of California, the Flag Land Base. This particular document appears as a brochure and is distributed in their organizations throughout the world. And as you can see, some of the courses are rather expensive.
OEC?
For instance, in the first course, up in the upper left-hand corner, under Flag Spiritual Counseling Service, there appears L10, L11, L12, 25 hours, $10,638.89. And the courses, as you go down, are generally in the $7,000, $3,000, $13,000, $12,000, $8,000, as you can see.
How much does it cost to complete a NOTS program? The NOTS program, the $25,000 program?
I'm not really sure. It changes at various times. The person to ask would be Ed Walters, but I've heard various figures that range in the $40,000 and $50,000 range. In the middle of the document, it appears there is a notation, package price. Elementary evaluated course, $10,638.84. OEC I believe that stands for senior OEC and internship, $22,341. And then OEC, SNR, OEC, FEBC, which the witness mentioned, which is Flag Executive Briefing Course, is $37,945.38. And there's another
Where do they
course,
get the 35
there's another course
cents?
there for $42,000.
Where do they get these odd amounts? I mean, is that tax or?
What is OEC, which is the one that's there for $1 million or something?
I believe that's the organization executive course.
Mr. Flynn, on these documents, unless we assume that, unless you tell us the contrary, these are all available to us from some source, valid source that we can look at. Is that correct?
That's precisely correct. This particular document, you could walk across the street and pick it up.
Oh, but I meant the one that you introduced previously. They're copies.
This particular document, the governing policy document, comes right out of a series of books, which, now that you've brought it up, we will bring in and put in front of you all of the books. And I believe the cost of the whole set is in the range of $2,000 or $3,000 for a 10 or 12 volume green set, in which this policy appears right in that set under finance.
How many times do people use their credit cards for donations?
I don't know. I really don't know.
Is that, I can't see that far, but does that say 1,773,000?
There's a few extra numbers in there. Correct?
Or it's a billion. It's
Looks like it's $1,063.89.
the OEC under flagship administration courses. And then OEC, yeah.
Does it range maybe from 11,000 to 17?
Yeah, that's what I said. That's what it is.
Which one are you talking about?
Flagship administration, the third one down, OEC.
Yeah, that would be 17.
Oh, not, okay. Then
That's the range. It's not $1 million. There's no course $1 million.
okay.
Oh, good.
And then you'll note at the bottom, attention credit card users, you may use your Visa or MasterCard card.
Mr. Flynn, are you going to point out the fact about the hotels and so forth and the suggestions that the above room donations are for single or double occupancy, and also the restaurants? I believe it refers that the suggested donations per week for dining is $80.
Yeah, as Mr. Shoemaker has not just done, he's pointed that out, and the costs appear to be regulated or fixed right next to the notation as to the type of room that's being received. And as the witness just testified, and as I believe Mr. Kelly testified, those are flat fees that are paid. Okay. And we will simply have marked, which we won't go into now, two more exhibits. One entitled Accommodations, describing the Fort Harrison Hotel, and then another one described as Donations List as the next two exhibits.
Now, your name is Mr. Hartwell. Is your wife with you yet, sir?
Does he want to wait for his wife? Or?
Do you want to wait for Mrs. Hartwell? Okay, we get started now. Mrs. Hartwell, when the officer comes, if you could just lead her down front to join her husband. All right, would you like to tell us in your own words, or would you like me to lead you through it with your testimony?
I guess I just go through part of it in my own words.
I'd rather you do that, sir. Go ahead.
Well, I've lived in Las Vegas for a number of years, and I met the wife some 15 years ago. We got married. We got married, and one of our activities in our side activities is dancing. We both enjoy dancing very much. We became rather accomplished at it, and one of the choreographers for the shows in Las Vegas wanted to choreograph a comedy dance routine using regular ballroom dancing, and she chose us as the ones to teach. So she taught us a good comedy routine, and about the time we finished it and began promoting it to go to work, she had suggested that we go to Scientology. She was a Scientologist, and take the comm course, and to take also a course that she was teaching in how to project yourself to the public, to people on that. And she thought it would be an awfully good thing. I had never had anything to do with Scientology up until that point. So I followed her suggestions. I went in and took the comm course. Why do you have to ask that? My memory's not the best, but if I remember right, I think it was 1979. Good. So just about the time that I had finished the comm course, which I can't remember now, a matter of 10 days or something along that line, I was approached by representatives from L. Ron Hubbard's personal location. They didn't represent themselves at that time that way, but anyway, they put to us a proposition of us going into the Church of
Scientology and following our dancing career. And of course, that was one thing that appealed to us pretty strongly because we hadn't made it here yet. But of all the other things that she offered too, it seemed like I got to where I finally thought, well, I was accepting a pretty good program. Now, my wife, of course, became more in favor of it much sooner than I did because I was pretty skeptical about a lot of things. But to start off with, her two daughters were in Scientology. The oldest daughter had been in for a number of years, and my stepson, her daughter's husband, had been in for a number of years, and he often talked to us about things about Scientology, the things they were doing, the things they were accomplishing, and some of the great things that they were doing. I always had kind of a, well, let's wait and see attitude about it, and I never did see any real results. But anyway, I started checking up until when they presented this program to us. Oh, I must have forgot. The younger daughter, Dawn, she was about 9 years old when we married. So I took and helped raise her too, actually as if she was my own child.
Take it, yeah. Just, we know it's tough.
Gentlemen, I'm sorry. I thought I was over that.
No, we can wait.
Some of us never get over it.
Anyway, they had, I'll explain this too. She was in junior high school. She was a very intelligent child. She was on the honor roll, and she did very well in straight A's, this type of thing here. But when she got into high school, for some reason, in that period of just a few months' time between junior high school and high school, she went wrong. We never could quite figure out what happened. But she didn't like high school. She couldn't seem to get adjusted to high school. She started ditching school and various things like this. So the other daughter, who was in Scientology, talked her mom into sending her to Scientology and see if they couldn't do something about her education. They had a much superior system and program and all this sort of thing. So they sold her on the idea of going in and leaving school altogether. So this was necessary for, I'd become pretty concerned about that. I wanted to know what kind of a program you had. I went down to try to find out what they were teaching her. And they was just telling her, telling me, hey, don't be concerned about it. It's not your concern. This is her mom's concern. And I got nothing but, a lot of baloney from them. So I tried to reason with Adelle about it, and I didn't seem to get anywhere with her either. So between her and the daughter, they both accepted Scientology's program. And they signed her in and sent her off. Just like that, she was gone. So I didn't have anything to do with it, really, and I just thought things weren't right. And I couldn't get a hold of anything that led me to believe that it was right. So in the meantime, then they came back to where they had presented us with this program of serving under L. Ron Hubbard. And some of the things that they presented it to us, one was, of course, our living conditions, where we would live and where we were going at. And they had told us we were going to Clearwater, Florida. And we were shown pictures of the hotel here, of our own rooms. We would have private rooms and the grounds, the swimming pool. We would have access to all the facilities there and that. And being right on the ocean and everything. Well, these things kind of appealed to me as the number one thing. So before I even made a decision on that, I went to the library and checked up, as much as I could on the area here, the weather and conditions and so on and so forth. And I liked the idea of it real well. Then, of course, other things that they promised us was a 5-hour working day. They promised that we would follow our dancing career. In fact, by the time they got through us, I thought we were going to become another Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire. Producing, in other words, our comedy routines and our dancing routines in movie work. So this, of course, appealed to us. It's something we're very much interested in. And our work schedules were supposed to amount to me becoming an editor or a photographer. So, again, this appealed to me, too. But quite a number of things. And one of the things that I did is I went and visited a fellow who had been aboard ship. I went and talked to Mary's daughter, who had been here to Clearwater, had been at the hotel and studied here. And they had nothing but good things to say about it. Nothing but good things to say about it. So over a 2 or 3 week period, I checked out everything that they had to offer. I checked everybody they could, everywhere I could, and I got nothing but good reports. So I said, hey, looks like it's all right. And I accepted, but under the conditions I accepted them. One, transportation. I had 2 automobiles at the time. I didn't want to really lose them. One, if there's any way I could take them with us. No, we couldn't do that. But they had all kinds of transportation here. We would have transportation whenever we needed it at the hotel. I checked this with her daughter too, and she told me yes. They have cars, staff cars. You can use them anytime you want to. So this was agreeable. The living quarters, the situation, I guess that covers most of the things that were promised to us. So I finally agreed to go ahead with it. And the arrangements were that we were to get ourselves to Los Angeles, and they would reimburse us for our expenses getting there, and then they would put us on a plane and fly us to Clearwater, Florida. So, of course, we were all excited about the whole thing. We got down to it. It seemed real good. They even gave us the address of the, Fort Harrison, the Clearwater Hotel. I mean, the
Sandcastle?
210 Harrison?
That's Fort
210
Fort Harrison Hotel.
That's the address they gave us, in other words, where we would be. And they gave us the local phone number here to give to other members of our family, the address and the phone number of where we would be in case they wanted to get in touch, the emergency come up and so on and so forth. So we were thoroughly convinced that this is where we were coming to. Now, when we got to Los Angeles, they took our belongings into the headquarters there in Los Angeles and stored them, put them in storage, in other words, sent us to a motel. The next morning, a car came over to pick us up and take us supposedly to the airport. So he left the motel we was at under a very hush-hush condition. You couldn't talk, so you might hear what's going on. And he left and drove around down the main street and off on side streets and checking his car over to make sure it wasn't bugged, checking it around and around to make sure he wasn't followed. And this went on, I thought, this is really, there's extra questions about this. And he explained to us that they had to take these precautions because they didn't want anybody to know where L. Ron Hubbard was. They didn't want anybody following him or anything, that sort of thing. So they finally ended up in Glendale, a town that I had lived in fact, myself, and ended up on one of the top stories of a public parking lot, a tiered parking lot. And then he pulled up alongside of another car, and from there told us we would be transferred to the other car. Our goods, we carried with us, a few things we had with us, were transferred to the other car, and the other driver took off with us. And still we're thinking we're going to the airport. Well, he leaves town, and the way he's going, I finally says, hey, I'm very familiar with this area. I've lived here most of my life. You're not going to the airport. Where are we going? And then he told us, well, we're sorry, but we just couldn't tell you exactly where you were going. We had to tell you were going to Florida, but you're not going to Florida. You're going to Southern California. Well, I mean, the shock to both of us was, I ended up speechless. I didn't really know what to say or think for a while. I was totally spellbound. But we finally agreed to go on down with him and at least look into the thing. The one of their big sales points, of course, was, I've almost forgotten this one, that they had assured us that we would be reunited with our daughter, for Dawn, that was where she was going to the same area, and that, I guess the other thing I didn't mention too, the thing that L. Ron Hubbard was doing was producing these movies as promotional things for the church and for also to get down all of his theories and philosophies and everything on movie film. So it would live forever after he died. We wouldn't have lived forever. This type of a story is what they give us. So we finally figured, well, the only thing we could do was go on down with this driver and see what the conditions were and pick it up from there and try to, that's the first real shock and disappointment they had, the first real lie we come across. But now when we get down to the location, it was right out of just a few miles out of Indio, just close to Palm Springs, which is the middle of the desert. I mean, the last place I would go to was there if I had a choice of where I wanted to go in life. I knew the area. I had been there before several times, and it's just like Las Vegas. Hey, I'll get the heck out of this desert. The main thing they told me I was coming to Clearwater, Florida. But anyway, we got down, and the next shock was seeing the deteriorated, dilapidated condition of the organization. I mean, we were built up to the point that I expected to go down there and find, gentlemen like yourselves dressed in suits with ties and clean and adequate facilities that you have here and that. I was absolutely shocked to see everybody running around in shorts, and ragged clothes, and dirty and unkept. And I couldn't believe my eyes what I was seeing. And of course, the ranch they took us to was in the same condition. Weeds growing all over it, the lawns had all died, the houses and buildings needed painting, and everything was a dilapidated, run-down condition, neglected condition. They just didn't take care of anything. So that's shock number two. Then, let's see how to explain this. Well, they had 3 ranches down there. They took us first, of course, to the main ranch. On the main ranch was their main activity. In other words, everything revolved around the main ranch. It was 50, 60 acres, something like that. And we met our daughter there. They brought her out to me Well, of course, this was great news to see her and know that she was all right, what was going on. And then we were told that the building we would live in was on one of the other ranches. And we didn't get to see it until late that night. They'd take us over that night. Oh, excuse me. Excuse me. Oh. All right. So we spent the afternoon there. Now, another thing that was very disturbing to us, too, was that all of our personal belongings were left in Los Angeles. I think we had a suitcase or two that we took with us in our overnight bag with a toothbrush and a few things like that. Otherwise, here we went to this place with most of our things still in Los Angeles. And then we just sat around the ranch that day and, showed this place and that place and basically roughly broke into what was happening. That night, about 11 o'clock, we were taken over to what was supposed to be our living quarters, and boy, you talk about shock number, whatever number it was. We just couldn't believe it. They put us into a little shack that apparently had been, I don't know what it was, just a little three-room shack. It was on the edge of another ranch there. And the driver took us up the door and said, well, this is where you'll be. Backed off and left us. We go inside, and I, God, what a mess. I just couldn't believe it. And, of course, the most worst thing about it is that the place was just totally overrun with bugs and insects and all kinds of desert, whatever you call them. They gave us a set of sheets, excuse me, and told us that there was another fellow that had been in the room that we were in, and we could just take his sheets and put them in one of the other rooms. They gave us the biggest room, which wasn't big enough. And the facilities consisted of nothing but a mattress on the floor. So as soon as we turned the lights on, of course, it stirred up the bugs and everything began to fly all over the place. And I pulled the sheets down bedding down to change the sheets on the place, and I swore there was at least 100 bugs on the sheets and that. My wife and I just couldn't believe it, So we just gave up right then. And we went over to another main house where other Scientologists were right in there. We went over there and simply told the guy in charge, I said, hey, there's no way we're going to stay in that place. I mean, there's been some big bad mistake one after another, but this is the limit. There's no way we can sleep here. So we had him call the main, I guess, master of arms, they call him. He came over and he sat down and explained to us, well, there's nothing we can do about it now. It's probably midnight by this time. He says, you just go ahead and clean up the place the best you can, sleep here at night. We'll have a better conditions for you tomorrow. So we argued with him for quite some time, but there wasn't anywhere I could get anywhere. I couldn't get anywhere with him. So we finally just said, there's nothing else we can do but go back and spend the night. So one of the other arguments that was so ridiculous about it, we had been forewarned going down there that they were having a lot of trouble with break-ins, burglars, close to the Mexican border, and had dope addicts that were breaking into places and stealing things. And they had just broken into the shack we were in the night before. They told us about this. The bathroom window they broke in, the window had been knocked out, was boarded up, see. So this is the one thing I explained to him. I said, well, I don't like the idea of being in here either. Going out tomorrow, leaving what possessions we have, we come tomorrow, they won't be here. Don't worry, he says, there's a burglar alarm system all around. He said, did you see it in there? I said, yeah, I saw the tape for the burglar alarm system. I'm familiar with those things. Just run real good on the windows, but not connected to anything. How's it going to ring an alarm? Oh, we're going to fix that tomorrow. Well, this is the type of thing that went on all the time over there. Of course, they never fixed it tomorrow. They never got rid of the bugs or anything else. The next morning, we were picked up and taken back to the main ranch. And, of course, we were just furious by then. I mean, both of us. I went right up to the person that had been responsible for getting me there. I happened to see him the first thing, and I just really chewed him up one side and down the other. Hey, there ain't nothing to do but get me the hell out of here. I ain't staying in this place. And I was really hot, of course. Well, they sent us in, told us, calm down, this. Finally got me calmed down enough to talk. So they took us sent us into the chaplain. First, of course, when I had breakfast, I went back to talk to the chaplain. And the chaplain was gone, so we spent about 3 hours with the chaplain's wife. And, of course, all she did was just lie to us again, lie after lie after lie about they had another ranch. They were going to put us in that the next day, and we would get our own private room. And it was real nice. They were just refurbishing it that day. And they were sorry about the inconveniences that we were brought down way ahead of time. And I said, you say we were brought down ahead of time. The girl and the man that came down to get us into the place were rushing us daily to get here because they were holding up production on the movies, and they had to get us there right away to get things rolling. So I said, we moved here as quick as we could. So anyway, I spent about, the first thing I told him, well, I don't care what you do, just get us the hell out of here. I'm going home. I'm going to stay here, and this, no way. She said, well, you can't leave here. I said, what do you mean I can't leave? You tell me I'm a prisoner here? Well, no, you're not a prisoner. I said, well, then fine, I'm not a prisoner. Get me out of here. See? That's all I want. I want transportation out here, and that's all there is to it. Well, this argument went on for about 3 hours. She finally promised a bunch of other things, smoothed it down. We finally said, well, we'll agree to take a better look at it. We realized that we've been lied to, disappointed, and this is nothing what we expected or was told. But we said, here's our daughter still involved, and all of our personal belongings. I don't want to leave without them. So we managed to stay, decided to stay at least a few more days and see what happened. Well, nothing happened. Now, we went to work. Our working conditions are the same as I explained to you before, from 7 o'clock in the morning till 11, 12 o'clock at night. I started belly aching the first week from my weekend off that I was supposed to have, and hey, you don't get no weekend off. Well, I went through all that stuff with the chaplain. We're sorry they lied to you about it, but there's nothing we can do now. We're punishing the person that told you all these things and all. In fact, they were. The 3 people involved were in the RPF when we got there. And my argument on the course is I didn't give a damn what you do with them. I'm interested in what you're going to do with me. Now, the other thing, too, let me explain this to you here. The other thing that will make a lot of difference in the things that I have to say, I think, and the other things other people have to say, is that we were not programmed into Scientology. We were not brainwashed. We were not following any great guiding light or any great influence that L. Ron Hubbard had. So this thing here, the other people that went there, all the other people that went there, they lived with those conditions and put up with them without squawking. It was all right with them. They didn't seem to mind the bugs, the snakes, and all the other things that were involved with, the lousy food and the lousy living conditions, all the dirt and everything else involved. They didn't seem to mind it, see. But we did. I would never gone, and I'd no any idea what it was. So I guess that covers that. But anyway, I decided to make another try at it. My wife and I both decided. Of course, this is the part that I forgot. One of the other things that was the main reason for us getting into it is my wife had taken, we both took that swine flu shot, and she had quite a reaction from it. I think they called it dysentery, or I don't remember what it was. In other words, she had a condition that was not correctable. We'd been to a number of doctors, and it had gone on for probably a period of 4, 5, 6 months. That was one thing that they had assured us that Scientology had the knowledge, know-how of to correct. Now, when somebody has a diarrhea condition like that for 4 or 5 months, believe me, they are pretty weak, pretty run down, and it's the condition she was. Health-wise, she was in real bad shape. So, of course, that's one of the things that I gave in on in realizing that perhaps they had the answer or would have the answer for bringing her back to health. So, that's, of course, one of the other reasons we decided to stay on. We'll see what they're going to do for her. Well, they didn't do anything for her. And it went on, and we asked for auditing and medical care and various things like this here to get her started on our program of going back the way to health. Well, we don't have any auditors right now. Well, we were told when we come down here that you had the very top auditors in the nation, and that they really had this thing under control. Well, we don't have any. We're sorry, we're training some. So another big letdown, a disappointment in line, that sort of thing, on that end of it. Let's see. Yeah. All right. All right. Okay, well, that's probably a good idea. In other words, just nothing but a total pack of lies the entire time that I was there. And I kept watching for the rest of my personal belongings to get there from Los Angeles. When they finally got there, I went back in and I told them, hey, I want out. There's no way that I intend to stay here. This thing has been totally misrepresented to me, and it isn't what I was looking for, and it's not what I'm going to put up with. I have no desire whatsoever to dedicate my life to L. Ron Hubbard and his projects at all. I want to live my own life. And you people
Tell me about your daughter,
Adele.
Adelle, how you... Okay.
Beg pardon?
I'm just trying to get you to... you're moving right on now, okay.
Adelle is his wife.
All right. So anyway, I go in and tell them I want to leave. They hold a board meeting on it. And they want to know why and all this. They give me all the reasons why, and I give them all the reasons why. It's nothing but a pack of lies, and you deceive me totally, and I'm just not going to spend the rest of my life here in this hell's hole as you have. So it was then a matter of deciding what to do and what the next step was. they had decided to release me, promised me they'd send me out the next day, and they were releasing Dell and I both. Now, this went on for, again, a matter of 2 weeks more before they finally released me. They had excuses day after day why I couldn't go. First it was one thing, the next day it was something else, and the next day it was something else, and this went on day after day. And then in the meantime, too, they had started a program of working Dell and I against each other, which I understand is a practice of anybody that they have trouble with Scientology. First thing they do is work the couple against each other. And they had started this and got it going pretty good. I got to where I wasn't quite believing what Dell said. She wasn't quite believing what I said. And they were making her believe that they couldn't do anything to her about her health program until they got rid of me, because I was the one that was causing the trouble for her. And they began to have her believing this, I believe. So I finally get out of there. It was one of the hardest things.
If I may interrupt just a minute there, that last point is a very significant point in consideration of the commission, and you may recall, make a note of that they led Mrs. Hartwell to believe that her illness was being caused by Mr. Hartwell, and you will hear her later testimony precisely why, but you might make a specific note of that point.
Anyways, I started to say, it was the last day they made the decision the wife wouldn't go with me, that she would stay there. And we sat down that day ourselves and talked it over, and we finally decided that maybe there was something to what they were saying, number one. Also was the fact that I had to get back to Las Vegas, obtain a job. I didn't have any, at that time, I no longer had a job. I didn't have any insurance. I didn't have enough money to go on with medical treatments for her. Had no way of covering anything in this line here. So we finally decided the best thing to do was to go back, for me to go back and leave her there. And perhaps they would take care of her then. And then the other thing, too, is the daughter was so brainwashed by that time, I couldn't reason with her anymore. I mean, I saw what a hopeless, helpless mess it was, and I tried to reason with her a number of times, but she couldn't accept anything I had to say at all. She was totally brainwashed into she was in heaven. So, you know, it's hard to do, leave them.
It just takes a second or two.
I'll get there.
Would you like to let's take about a 5-minute break then.
I'll only go back to the same thing. Might as well get it over on here.
Are you here to sit, sir?
Mike.
Just joining us, we're talking to Mr. Ernest Hartwell, who was promised to come to Mecca, Clearwater, sold his possessions and to try and find his daughter, and has somehow ended up in a desert. So far he's probably 3,000 miles away from here, and I'd like you to continue where you left off, sir.
Okay. First thing I want to say, I'm sorry.
That's fine.
But
Apologies.
yeah, it's one of the bad things about the church, breaking up families, loved ones, and various things like this. Seems like they do everything they can to destroy families and happiness. To me, like I said, it was the hardest thing I think I ever had to do in my life. Leaving them there in the condition that they were in, and leaving them with a man that was totally insane. Now, I hadn't mentioned this before, but I want to say that. A number of people, when I come back, ask me what I thought of L. Ron Hubbard. I told them the man's crazy, absolutely insane. Now, that's my own personal belief, my observations, things I saw him do. He was a screaming maniac 3 or 4 times that I saw him. One of the times that I saw him, he come in and issued conflicting orders, and that seemed to have been one of his regular habits, telling you to do one thing and turn right around a few minutes later and telling you not to do it. They expect you to do both orders. So, anyway, I got out of there. And then, after I got back to Las Vegas, it did take me, as a matter of fact, about a month and a half before I went back to work. And when I got back to work, shortly after I got back to work, the chaplain from there, Fred Rock, came to Las Vegas and approached me with a story that he had heard I was responsible for disclosing the location of where L. Ron Hubbard was. There had been a leak in security or something. Of course, I told him he was wrong. I hadn't said a thing at all, and he was going to chase it down. Fine, chase it down. You're finding out. Anybody can tell you that it was me. I'd like to talk to him with a certain mistake. So then he produced our marriage license and told me that he had obtained our marriage license from my wife and that she wanted a divorce. And this is something that just left me speechless because I couldn't believe it. I felt that we had a real strong thing going with each other, and we did have. We were real close to each other, and we never had any real trouble until this thing came up in our married life, and so I just couldn't believe it. But anyway, he left, and after he left, the more I thought about it, the more confused and everything else I became on it. And so I really put a... Oh, the other thing is that he wanted to know if they could use my address, and would I accept passports for Don and Adelle, my wife. And I wanted to know what for, and he says, well, they're moving out of the United States to one of the foreign countries, and they'll have to have passports, and we have to have a local address to send the passports to. And so I told him yes. I just so shocked and still spellbound, I couldn't even figure out what was going on, Then, of course, after he left, that really worked on me, and I became more upset with the entire situation. But the outcome of it was that I did manage to get Adelle back home a month or so after that. Now, just shortly after she came back home, they approached Adelle first and said that she would have to pay a $5,500 freeloader debt that was incurred during the time that she was in there for expenses and services that she had received. Or she would have to go back on staff as a member of the Church of Scientology locally. So when I heard that, I just, I always went right through the ceiling. So I went down into the office of the GO's office and told him, hey, there's some big bad mistake. When we were cleared out of it, a notice was put right on the bulletin board that we were being released clear and free of any indebtedness. And now you're coming back telling us we owe $5,000. Hey, chase it down, it's a big bad mistake. So they did. They called me back a couple of days later and says, well, Hartwell, we want to inform you that now you owe $5,500 as well as your wife. So you owe $10,500 debt to Scientology. And of course, I went, as far as I could go with it locally, back to her daughter, and they had them writing letters back and forth, and they kept giving me stalls and stalls and stalls on the same issue. I finally went down there to Indio and just raised holy hell. But I got the letter then from them that said that I was free and clear. We didn't owe any indebtedness. Went back to Las Vegas, and her daughter the next morning is at our house and wants us to go down to Scientology and sign another document. Sign another document. So what do I want to sign another document? I got all I need. I'm free and clear of the joint. They're free and clear of me. Well, they're, of course, a highly paranoid operation. That's what they're just scared to death that somebody's going to let somebody know we're wrong of it, or some of the secrets of the church. So we spent 3 hours with her daughter, thereabouts, arguing about, hey, I've been through this goddamn thing for days. I don't want to hear nothing more about it. Get out of here and leave me alone. I don't want to work church. I ain't coming down. I ain't signing no papers. And the discussion went on about they just had a couple of questions they want to ask us. Just ask them. No, we had to go down to church and ask them. No way. So I finally got them out of there. And then I got them out with the agreement that we would go down in a couple of days and find out what it was all about. I mean, I simply had my fill of it. So went down a couple more days. Now they got they want me to sign another letter stating that I owe them $30,000 if I say any more about the Church of Scientology, and I had welched on my agreement with them by threatening them and this sort of thing here. I had threatened them, of course, and but I hadn't done anything, or hadn't said anything, or anything else. So just trying to get them off my back. So now this goes on. They tell me what they want. I said, hey, I ain't signing no agreement like that. You don't have to worry about me. Out of all the time in the agreement, I held my end of the agreement. Of all the things that we were supposed to do, I held up my bargain and the bargain on everything. I haven't said nothing about nobody. But you people have double-crossed me, lied to me, and double-dealt me time after time after time. Now, I want a letter from the Church of Scientology that says that you're going to leave me alone. Now, you get off my back. I'm not on yours. You get off my back. I told him how to write the letter. Well, of course, a few days later, they called me back, told me over the phone, yeah, we got a agreement here just like you wanted. Come down and sign it. So I went down. They got the same thing. So we had another half a dozen meetings, and finally the local organization said there's nothing more they could do about it. I said, well, fine, let's leave it going. Now, harassment went on for months after that. They sent a fellow out from the main organization in Los Angeles. He started a big harassment program. And it ended up by him finally telling me that they had definite proof that I was trying to extort money from the Church of Scientology, and that they were going to put me in jail if I didn't sign a new agreement. Now, he had a new agreement. This agreement here, this breaks my heart to even get into this one again, too. But they were trying to get me to sign statements to the fact that I had been an alcoholic all my life, that I had totally neglected my own children as well as Don, and that I had been abusive to my children, that I was a poor father and poor provider, and that I had just a number of defamatory statements like this. And, of course, the last statement was that I now owed the Church of Scientology $60,000, and I was supposed to sign this. I said, I told the guy, hey, no way. And so, and it's not any nice terms like that, you know. Anyway, that same night, they had sent Adele's daughter to our house where we were living, and she went there, she'll tell you her end of the story, to threaten her with our lives. So, after that, up until that point, I didn't realize what demons I was dealing with. I didn't realize that they were lying and trying to do everything that they could, and do anything they could to destroy us. Actually, they had cost us our jobs. They cost both of us our jobs. They had us both fired from our jobs. They had us moved out of the place we were living in. I don't want, they'll probably tell you about other things that happened to us during this harassment period, but that was the last one. When they threatened to put us in jail on that, I went to the police department then. And in fact, they made the threat on our lives. I got scared. Believe me, I did get scared. Because it's a known fact there are a lot of suicides in connection with Scientology. I didn't want to be one of them. So I went to the police department, told them exactly what happened, made a report on it. And the next day we took Belle down and she made a report on the same thing. And then I went to the newspapers. I forwarded the whole story. I told them everything about where Ron Hubbard was, what the church was like, what they were doing. I went to television stations, went to radio stations. I got on the air. I mean, I got public right quick. I figured that's the only way I would have freedom from them. And sure enough, it worked. They didn't bother me a day after that. The first story came out. They didn't bother me a bit. I was free. Finally got freedom. So I guess that's the last of the story. There's other things that happened.
Do they sue you?
Well, yes. Then after that, they brought a lawsuit against me.
What was the law?
Well, I forget how.
You want to get into that, but they left you alone as far as dirty tricks. They did bring a lawsuit against you.
Yes, fine.
Okay.
Oh, well, yes. Here's several other things that happened now. They, too, went public, and they made public statements to the fact that I was an alcoholic, that I had a drinking problem, that I had murdered my father. They took, let's see, there's several other things they brought out, I don't know. Oh, this another thing is that they...
On the story in the newspaper that I was guilty of extortion, that they had definite proof the Church of Scientology, that Ernest Hartwell was trying to extort money from them. But out in the newspaper like that, and run over the television, the same story. So these things, of course, made it pretty bad for me, too.
Tell me about your daughter tried to kill you, did you say that? Or made a threat in your life?
Beg pardon?
Did you say your daughter tried to kill you or threaten your life?
No, she didn't. I think probably it would be better if my wife would tell that in the story, because I might word it.
Why don't we have your wife come up now and tell her what she'd like to know and say, and then we can question both of you when it's appropriate. Mrs. Hartwell, will you please be sworn in, please, by Miss Godot?
Raise your right hand. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do.
I must ask you the same 5 standard questions I've asked your husband, and I'm asking everyone that appears before us as witnesses. Number 1, are you appearing today and testifying under oath voluntarily?
Yes, I am.
Have you been paid by anyone for your testimony other than expenses coming to Clearwater?
No.
Do you have a lawsuit against the Church of Scientology?
Yes, we do.
Does the Church of Scientology have a lawsuit against you?
Yes.
Has anyone suggested to you that you should state anything but the truth, or has anyone suggested that you change your testimony for any reason?
No.
Thank you. Now, if you would tell your story and Your own words, please.
Well, I think Ernie has covered quite a bit of it, except I would like to say that when I found out I was going into the desert, my heart just sunk, because it wasn't where I wanted to go either. Also, I'd like to say that when we did get united with Verdun down there, I realized how brainwashed, that she was cold.
Dawn is your daughter.
Yes. She wasn't the same girl that had left us. I can't quite explain it, except it was just a cold feeling. I was appalled, like Ernie said, with the swearing, the cussing. In fact, I was crying one day and said I'd have to go home to learn to cuss and swear before I could ever survive down there. And then another thing that was real shocking, I was in the shed one day, the wardrobe working, and I hadn't met Hubbard at this time, and I heard this terrible, screaming, filthy language like I had never heard before. I had something in my hand, and it just fell to the floor, and my mouth flew open. I said, "Who in the world was that?" And they said it was the boss, because we weren't allowed to use the word Hubbard because of security reasons. And I said, "You mean the leader of the church speaks like that?" And they said, "Yes, he doesn't believe in keeping anything back." So that was quite a shock. The main thing that I disliked, too, was when we first got there, before we could leave the place, we had to be programmed on the lies that we had to tell. If we run into one of our friends, we had to lie to them and tell them that we were just there for a vacation, and we had the man's name and everything to give. We had to go 25 miles to use the telephone, and usually there was somebody with us. We couldn't use the phone. There was no papers. We never read the paper. We were schooled on how to get away from process servers, FBI agents, any government official or any policeman that wanted anything to do with Hubbard. If we had to, there was 4 different ways that they trained us to handle them, even if we had to use mental force, physical force. And that went on for days, that training. First, one of us would be the FBI agent, and the other one would be who we are, until we had it down pat. We also had to lie if we run into a Scientologist. We were there from Clearwater on a mission, and we were returning. There was no way that we could have our friends or relatives come see us. So we were just like we had been cut off from the world. We worked behind closed, locked doors with curtains always pulled. If the utility man or anybody come on the property, we were alerted. We were to stay in as much as possible, not run around, watch our language, their language. I was all right. And we were to hide anything pertaining to the word Scientology, books or anything that would disclose that it was the Church of Scientology. We also had to, anytime we left from one building to another, everything that we carried had to be in sacks. There was nothing that could be visible that had Scientology on it. And that was always a worry. And when we were outside, we were not to use the language that Scientology used. And so you was under constant strain, and I was even afraid to go on lib because I was afraid that I would disclose his hideout by saying something. Fred Rock was put in the RPF because he said the word Scientology on the golf course. So this is how rough it was. We also, there was something else I wanted to say about it. The way they got my marriage license is we had to make a story up about where we were, that we were going overseas because Ron's hideout had been exposed by someone, and they made me to believe it was Ernie that had exposed it. And so he needed our marriage license, and I didn't even question it. And he also needed our birth certificates for Don's and mine. But it wasn't just us, it was everybody in the Los Angeles area that was around there that had to get passports. So their loved ones all thought that they were going overseas. And so that way they couldn't contact them here, where we were. We were given a lawyer's name and address that we had to memorize. We couldn't leave the base until we had it memorized perfectly in case there was an accident or that we were ill or in the hospital. And we were to use this lawyer's name, and he would come and take care of everything. When they went to the doctors or the dentist, we always used, I used my real name there, but I think they used their real name, but they always went by someplace and picked up a fake address and said that we were friends staying with somebody. We weren't from that area. There was always people going to and from the doctors. L. Ron Hubbard believed that anybody that was ill was a double threat to him. One, they couldn't produce, so they were no good to him. Number two, he was terrified of a germ of any kind, and so they were locked up in, I'd say, about a 10 to 12 room. And at one time, there was 13 boys and girls, both in this room, running high fevers, and all of them smoking. And I mean, you couldn't hardly see who was in there. It was so terrible. And they were treated like an enemy in this room. And because they were. Hubbard, I saw him throw fits. I actually saw him take his hat off one day and stomp on it and cry like a baby. I have seen him just take his arms like this and throw them wide. He's hit girls in the face. And one girl would follow him with a chair. If he sat down, that chair had to be right where he was going to sit. One girl missed by a few inches. He about fell off of it, and she was put in the RPF. And the other girl would carry an ashtray, catching his very ash. They'd have to pop the cigarettes in his mouth when they wanted it. He had one man that would just wash his clothes and changed his clothes for him. He had a nurse. He had one woman that did nothing but clean the house. And he had one man that did nothing but cook his 3 meals a day. And it took him from 6 in the morning till about 10 at night to cook those 3 meals and prepare. I was with Hubbard every day for about a month. I should say every night. We would start, our daily job we'd start about 12 o'clock, and we would go at noon, and we would go until the sun came up the next morning, and most of the time without anything to eat after 6 o'clock at night. And so we was working almost around the clock except the evening meal. They said that they couldn't, no way they could give me any auditing because of my illness, because Ernie was upset and he had me upset, and that as soon as Ernie left, why then they would start and give me real auditing and get me to the doctor. By the way, when they came to sign us up, I explained to them my trouble, and I told them that I needed a good doctor, and I did think that maybe auditing would help, and which they promised me both. And so this was one of they showed me a picture of the hotel and said that, do you think Hubbard would live in anything any worse than this? So naturally, that's where we expected to come, was to a beautiful place. Okay, the RPF down there didn't function like it did over here because they had no place for the RPF. Another thing, when we went on base, we were schooled that we had to, it was a bad place for rattlesnakes, scorpions, and of course black widow spiders. We had to wear boots and carry flashlights at night. The RPF had their clothes in boxes, and their mattresses was thrown out on the ground with the spiders and the scorpions and the RPF. They had to run everywhere. You couldn't talk to them. I was written up several times for talking to Verdun. I also saw her one day. Every time I would go by doing my work, I would see her dragging her mattress from one shade tree to the other. I says, "What are you doing?" And she was ill. She couldn't be in with the others. And so she was hunting shade and keeping out of it's 117 degrees. And she was hunting shade because she was ill. I worked one day, ironed out in the heat, out in the sun because it was cooler in the shade. And it was 117 degrees then. And without any food the whole day. And at 5:30 I just became desperately ill. And I told him I had to leave. And I staggered. It was quite a ways, about 3 blocks from where we were shooting the movies up to where the dorm was. And I was staggering. I'd go first into the fence and then into the ditch. It was like I was drunk. But anyway, I just made it to the bunk and just crashed. They came in and woke me up and said at 7 o'clock I had to go down because Hubbard was going to be on the set. And I wouldn't do it. And I was written up because I took a 3-hour nap. And another time I complained I had to go home because I wasn't getting treated. I was then bleeding and in quite severe pain. And the way they took me right down to Claw, put me on the meter, said I could go home or could go right to the doctor. And the next night they had us scrubbing the barn. We started at 6 o'clock and we scrubbed that barn till 4 o'clock in the morning. And they had me carrying buckets of water. Anybody that ran a fever was immediately put out of commission, but anybody that was ill and not running a fever, they were made fun of and ridiculed because they thought more of their body than they did of Hubbard's work. There was no unity. There was no working together. It was like if you were going over here and somebody was coming this way, you couldn't stop and say hello, because then that would stop you and slow you down to get to your point, so you might not get your work done. And one day we were laughing and joking on the job, and the supervisor told us if she ever caught us doing that again, we'd go into the RPF. It was strictly work, no pleasure. If you're in the lower conditions, all money stopped coming in, what little bit there was. You didn't get any pay. And you didn't get any libs, so you were just held prisoner. While we were there, when we first got there, in fact 2 days after we left home, which was about a 5-hour trip, my nephew drowned. And we didn't get word. It took 10 days for them to notify us that my nephew had died. And this was by a letter from my sister that went to Clearwater and then back to where we were, because they wouldn't give us the telephone call. All our mail was read before it left that base. I wrote 3 letters to Ernie before one of them got through, and I finally said everything's going great, because everything else came back and I had to rewrite it. All the mail, like we said, had to come here and then go to Clearwater. Nearly every time I went to the phone after Ernie left, I had to be there was a guard with us. I never come in alone after that. Oh, by the way, too, when my nephew did die, I got word of it. I demanded that I come in, go into Palm Springs and make a phone call to my sisters. And it took us from 7 o'clock in the morning until about 6:30 that night. They finally get us a broken down truck. We had to buy the gas, and they gave us 2 hours. If we weren't back in those 2 hours, they were going to call us the police and have us arrested for stealing the truck. I saw men, I don't know how many left the base while I was there, but it was quite a few. I saw grown men, such as my husband, that cried for days, maybe 2 to 3 days, and they were under constant guard before they were allowed to leave. They drove people so close to suicide before they were allowed to leave that base. The women was just constantly crying, and it just tore me up. I also, the last month I was there, was filing Hubbard's orders, and I read this one that I don't know how many times I had to read it for it to really sink in, was that Elaine Waite was going to commit suicide. And Hubbard, this is what the order said, I don't care if Elaine Waite's going to commit suicide or not, but get her off of my land before she does. Now, where was the help? You know, where was the religious counseling? The only time that the word God was used was in vain. And I mean, it was used constantly. There was no civil talking to each other. It was all cussing and swearing. I know one night I had to cry. If you cried, you were taken into ethics. So I was laid out on the diving board where I could see all around me, and I had a good cry. But another thing that was shocking, too, was Ernie wrote me a most wonderful letter, and I was so thrilled because he was on course and he was doing so great. And I thought, well, gee, I'll show him. And so I showed it to one of the girls, and she said, you go right down into ethics. She says, and you get this straightened out right now. They don't want you to be happy. They don't want you to be united. It's just individualism. I saw my daughter very little because she first was in the RPF. Then they put her in isolation again. She got ill. Her fever went up 1 degree and down 1 degree. And she was in there for about 2.5 months in this one room, not allowed to see anybody. You can imagine what that has done to her brain. Then when we did come home, we thought everything was going smooth and everything when the harassment started. The night that it was 12:30 at night when Mary Louise came to my home, and she kept trying to get me out of the house. I was, mother is the only one that would know the feeling I had. I opened the door, and I would really rather face there that night for my daughter. And yet I can't tell you why, except her face, her eyes, and her attitude. I refused to leave the house. And I can't really remember anything that went on, but I know it went on all the time that Ernie was with Alan Hubbard. And finally she wanted to know if we were afraid for our lives, and I told her yes. And then the police told us we should report that. And then the next day we were told we had to move out. And then the next day they came on my job. I worked at MGM where it was strictly guarded with millions of dollars of money in costumes. And I turned around and my daughter was there. And she came, I told her not to come in again. She's jeopardizing my job. She came back 2 different times, brought Alan Hubbard with her once. The last time she told me that she says, I want you to know that nobody has been murdered over anything as this of yet. but it's going to get a lot worse before it gets any better. And I started to cry, and I said, yes, I know it is. Then she put her arm around me and said that she loved me.
Hey, we need a break.
No.
Sorry.
Mr. Hartwell, I think we've heard enough as far as your narrative. I'm just going to ask you a few questions, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Calderbank. It just seems incredible that a couple like you sells everything and wants to be a dancer and maybe make movies, and you're given this carrot, which is a brochure of sparkling clear water, and you end up in a desert, and you can't leave, and your marriage is about to fall apart. You're separated, you're divided, you're conquered, and your daughters want nothing to do with you, and you're destroyed financially, mentally. That's just difficult for me to believe, and I'm sure everyone in this room. And I, frankly, don't know where to start to ask you questions. I think you've said it all. So for the time being, I will just yield, and maybe Mr. Calderbank has something to ask you.
I think Mrs. Hartwell has one more thing to add.
There was another time that was really terrifying, and this was when Ernie had all his meetings with him alone and left me out of it. But this one, why Alan said I had to be there because I had to sign the paper. Alan Hubbard was the man sent from California to handle us.
Any relation?
No, they say he isn't anyway. Anyway, so we went down to the motel room to meet with him. We thought alone, and there was both my daughters and their husbands, and they had flown my daughter and her husband in from Indio just to use against us. And they came in the night before, and yet they hadn't even called us. They hid my other daughter's car so we wouldn't know that she was there. And we started talking, and all of a sudden, another one that was with Alan Hubbard, I don't know him, I don't know what he looks like because I was so terrified. But he all of a sudden jumped up and started to yell at Ernie, saying what a beast he was, what a terrible man I had because he was trying to extort money from the church. He was no good, that I knew what was right and what was wrong. I needed to get rid of him. I needed to divorce Ernie and get back into the church because I knew where it was right. And finally, Ernie got me out of the room. It seemed to me like it went on for hours. I don't know how long it did, but to me it just seemed forever. But Ernie tried to get me to drive home, but I couldn't because I felt like if I left the room that day, I'd never see my daughters again, and it was close to being true.
Where are your daughters now?
One is in Las Vegas, which we never can talk to her, and the other one's in L.A.
Are they still within the Church of Scientology?
Yes.
Why couldn't you leave? Didn't have a car, or you that far out in the desert, or were you broken spiritually? And
I was still hanging on to, I had to get to a doctor, and with Ernie coming home and no job to go to, he didn't have the money to give me to a doctor. And I had been told that if I didn't get attention soon, that it would be cancer. And so I was still hanging on to them getting me to a doctor, which they did in September. They finally got me to a doctor.
Did Mr. Hubbard cure your cancer?
Oh, yes. I wouldn't know what he had. No, he couldn't cure anything. He's too terrified of any sicknesses.
Mr. Calderbank.
It's hard to ask questions after that. Would you like to take a break?
I'm fine.
Okay.
One thing, what year, for the record, did this take place?
78, 9, was it?
How long?
Well, when did you leave? When did you leave for Clearwater and end up in the desert? What year was that, and how long were you in the desert?
It was, I think it was May of '79 we went. Ernie came back in July. I came back in October.
Did you ever make it to Clearwater until today?
Yes, last year and a half ago I was here for the Tenney trial.
I have no questions, Commissioners. I don't know if you want to question them anymore. I think we've heard everything, but I don't think we should question them. But if there's something that you want to ask that, for the record, go ahead. Mr. Calderbank first.
So just very clearly, the main reason you got Clearwater was held out to you, and the whole start of your entire journey was that you were coming to Clearwater, a beautiful city. You know,
I should clear up one thing. We were to come to Clearwater and then go a short distance from Clearwater because Hubbard wasn't in the Fort Harrison Hotel, but he was close by.
Did you ever hear the term Dunedin used?
The one?
Dunedin?
It's another city.
It's a town north of us.
No.
It's interesting. This is a little off the subject. You don't know about this, but everybody in Clearwater virtually was sent a booklet from the Church of Scientology. I think it was The Way to Happiness. Mm-hmm. They had the various numbers, and they said that the way to quote-unquote happiness was not to lie, not to do illegal acts, and one of the major tenets was to keep the family together. And
written by
and copyrighted by Mr. L. Ron Hubbard. I know you've answered it, but how would you characterize that, or what would you say to the people of Clearwater that would receive a book like that? How could you sum up and tell them your experiences versus what they're holding out?
I'm not sure I understand. Go ahead.
What advice do you have to give the citizen of Clearwater?
I would certainly advise anybody against accepting or believing anything that L. Ron Hubbard said. I mean, to me, he's nothing but a flat-out liar. And, of course, he's a great fabricator of all kinds, but he does quite a job, too, of blowing things up way beyond proportion of what they are. It's my belief that he has used psychoanalysis, something that was discovered by another man and progressed pretty well along by the time Hubbard got a hold of it. And he has simply called auditing. It's nothing but psychoanalysis. He's called it auditing. Now, I say this because I had some psychoanalysis treatment myself some 30 years ago, and I found what little bit of auditing that I got into was identically the same thing. And the principles of it are identically the same thing. In fact, Ron Hubbard himself gives credit to Freud for a lot of this philosophies.
I would like to say this. My heart bleeds for every youth that's in there because I know the brainwashing they've had. I know the damage they've had because we've gone through it. And once they step out that door and face reality, they need help, and that's the way I feel.
Adelle, did they actually tell you that auditing would cure your sickness? It was a side effect of
between the auditing and a good doctor, which there was supposed to have been one of the top doctors in the United States at base, is what they told me.
Okay. Mr. Burfield, do you have any questions?
Just a couple. I'm going to ask Mr. Ernest, no better than to ask a woman, what is your age?
My age?
Yes.
62.
The reason for that is we've seen a lot of young people come in here, and I was just curious. I will not ask your wife that. I will ask her one question, though. If I can paraphrase it in answering to Mr. Calderback's question here, this treatment that they offered you, would you say that that's a fraud in your own mind, not recognizing what the legal term fraud would be?
The treatment they offered, you say?
Yes.
Well, yes, definitely. Yes. I am aware, and I agree, that certain mental problems can be cured by the process that they use, psychoanalysis, in other words, or through psychiatric treatment. We all know that. And they probably do enjoy a certain amount of success with problems that people have mentally. But when it comes down to physical problems, and I think it's an entirely different story. To give you an example now, I have varicose veins very bad in one leg, and of course I'm always concerned about it as far as our dancing career is concerned. But they told me they would cure them. I was told right off they could cure them. That, of course, I found out later is nobody's ever heard of anybody curing varicose veins through mental treatment.
Just one other question. I've noticed among the people that have testified here that, in the back room, that there seems to be a tremendous camaraderie among those of you that have left Scientology. And I've asked the question of the previous ones, who you could turn to, and apparently there's no one that you feel that you can turn to outside the church. Is that correct? For help?
In regards to what?
In regards to searching for help.
Oh, sure.
While you're in the church.
Sure, if you have mental problems or physical problems,
In our society, there's many people we can turn to, of course. No, I mean the church itself. Fear of the church. Leaving the church. Fear of leaving the church. State your question from you.
Well,
I think it's something I want to answer, all right.
I guess more your wife, the fact of leaving the church, what retaliation would be taken against the two of you if you left the church?
Well, that's the thing that they do, of course. They instill a great amount of fear into you. This happened to us from the day one that we got there until we got out of there. In fact, the fear has never really left us. There are quite a few full-blown psychos in the organization of Scientology. I am sure, or at least I feel there are. And I think that we, even today, live in fear of one of the persons taking it upon himself to say, hey, we must destroy this enemy or that enemy. I mean, they are constantly hammered this type of thing to them anyway. Their enemies must be destroyed. So the average person doesn't do such a thing. But we live in fear of it. I do. And, of course, like I've heard other people testify here today, they couldn't quite walk out of the building. Hey, man, the reason they couldn't walk out of the building, they were scared to death. They were giving nothing but fear. And, of course, the first time that second and third time that you hear people say committing suicide from being in Scientology, the confusion that you're in, the message you're in, and you know what you're faced with, hey, you are scared. You really are. I mean, I was as scared to leave there myself, really as scared, because I didn't know what would happen to me. I was as scared, too, of leaving them there, because I didn't know what would happen to them. They put that fear into you right from the very beginning, and they hammer it to you, and they maintain it. You're scared all the time that you're there, believe me. You're scared to blow your nose. One of the biggest things, of course, is the RPF program. You're scared of speaking out of term to people in the RPF. You're scared of everything. Now, one thing that scared me, I talked with my wife when we was there. They kept stalling me day after day before they sent me home. In the meantime, about a half a dozen guys had left there. They called blow. They were supposed to have blown. Well, I finally said to myself one day, hey, did they blow or are they buried up in the hills somewhere? I mean, I'm not saying anything like this happens, but hey, some people disappeared, and I begin to say to myself, why ain't they sending me home? I'm beginning to think they're looking for the right opportunity to bury me in the hills. I mean, they instill that fear into you. Believe me, it's just there. And when it comes down to making these death threats on us, maybe I'm a chicken of some sort, but I ain't. I'll face anything. I faced the worst thing that they had, but I was afraid they were going to bury me. I really was, from what they put into me.
Just one last question here. There seems to be a thread that runs through here of a divide and conquer of the family, or the family unit. And I've asked this question, and Mr. Calderbank asked it in another way. If you could get the message to all the people of Clearwater, what would you say to them today?
Stay out of Scientology. That is your question. Don't have nothing to do with Scientology, believe me.
You're already in.
That's good answer.
You're talking about people who are in?
Those that are in and those that are outside of it, the people in Clearwater.
Well, what the people are in, really there's not much you can say to them because they're totally brainwashed and stocked into things. The people are out, hey, stay out. Or might not ask you a question.
Our purpose in this hearing is as a legislative hearing, not as a court, is looking out for the health, safety, and welfare of the people of Clearwater. And that's what we're trying to establish here and what we can communicate and do for those people of Clearwater.
Well, I think the people are reading, especially now, and have before, as far as concerned, enough accounts in the local paper and that of what Scientology is, what they do, and how they operate. Surely the residents of Clearwater, Florida, should be able to know what Scientology is by now and be able to keep out of it.
I'd like to say something here. The way I look at it is I feel that what the ones in Scientology needs is somebody like the Flynn's that has given us support. Because trying to find a lawyer and going to a lawyer with the story that we had, they thought we were crazy. And we just about didn't go public because they thought we were crazy. Now, what needs to be set up is a deprogramming program where they can be deprogrammed, which would take away the fear of the ones coming out. And they also need to be, it's like a concentration camp. They need to be set up to where they can be rehabilitated.
That's a comment that we shouldn't really be into an area about deprogramming. We're concerned about their external activities and their business activities, and that's something that I've advised that we should not pay too much attention to, although it's certainly very important and well said.
It's a fair public opinion comment.
Mrs. Garvey, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Hartwell, for coming here. It's been a very difficult one for you, and coming from, having children of my own and coming from a large family, I can share a little bit, I think, the feelings that you're going through. Just to go back on a couple of things that you said. Mr. Hartwell, you talked about the good reports that you got about Clearwater. Were these from Scientology staff people, or were they from recruiters, or who in particular did you get this kind of good reports on Scientology flag organization in Clearwater?
We'll say mostly from her daughter, and then we have one other person, well, we have several other people, in fact, in Las Vegas that were here. We have one person particularly, I think one family, two people in other words. That
vacationing?
No, they were in Scientology.
Scientology.
They were aboard the ship, Apollo, and they landed here and got to know somewhat what it was like, and everybody spoke well of it. And I can understand why now that I see it myself. I can give up Las Vegas very easily, believe me.
That's where the problems we have, yes. Did you want...
I think she was asking something.
The messengers, when they come out, were the others that...
Oh, yeah.
With the what?
They're messengers from the Commodore's messenger org called a CMO. They are like the elite of Scientology. We'll get into them at a later point in time.
Okay, they were sent out then after you expressed an interest. Is that it? Okay. Were you talked or told about auditing as part of Scientology if you went and going through auditing process?
Yes,
And were you told that this is a scientific method of doing whatever, curing whatever your handle was or your problem?
Very definitely, yes.
Were you ever told that it would be kept confidential?
Yes.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, they took information out of my confidential file and used it against me.
Obviously, then you would not have done the auditing if you'd have known it was not going to be kept confidential.
Well, of course not. No. Even part of that stuff was information was published in the newspaper.
Some of your auditing information was in the papers. Okay. You've already promised working. Mrs. Hart, will you make comment about written up? What does written up mean?
Everybody spies on everybody. I was even afraid to speak to my daughter because she would write me up. You do
Which is basically reporting back to the authority. Okay.
They do this to keep everybody in line. They say it's for their own good because if the person knows they're caught, well, then they won't do it again. So you're really supposed to be doing it for their own good, but it is just spying on each other.
Just one. Here's another one. You made comment about pay. Were you paid at all while you were in this?
We were like whoever it was testifying today. We were promised $17.50 a week, but when we got down there and we had to study the different courses before, like the sec check I was telling you about, we were only paid because we were on study. Our pay was cut to $7.50 a week, And then, like I said, too, the RPFers, and if you're on the lower conditions where it seemed like I was most of the time, there's no pay.
No pay if you're
No pay, but more work.
You just casually mentioned sec checks, security checks. What, did you both go through security checks?
Very vividly when we got down there, and that was the, I think, the main purpose. Now I can see the main purpose is to find out if there's anything in the your background that they can use.
Is that a check or a question and answer thing of about 100 and 150 questions to ask everything that they want to know that you wouldn't want to tell them otherwise?
Right.
Okay, we saw that earlier, Mr. Penn.
That's Exhibit 6 for the record.
Okay. Okay, that's...
Is that it, Ms. Gunn? Mr. Hatchett, do you have any questions?
No, Miss Hartwell, I'm as happy that you came. My heart bled as I listened. I don't think I need to ask you any questions.
Mr. Shoemaker.
Mr. and Mrs. Hartwell, something that I don't know whether you would have this answer or not, but I think it's something everyone would like to know. Of course, apparently from what we have heard and what we understand, being close to L. Ron Hubbard from a Scientologist point of view would be almost like going to heaven. That would be the greatest thing that could happen.
Oh, yes, very true.
And the fact that they came and recruited you when you were not directly related to Scientology and then brought you in immediately to where he was located, did you ever understand why they selected you to do this?
No, we kept asking ourselves, why us, you know? And then I keep telling Ernie, I says, well, everybody on the planet, or, you know, in Scientology, would give their right arm to be here. I says, why don't we feel that way? What is there? What's here? And that's the way we say it.
I think I could add this. Well, go ahead if you did something.
Yes, no, sir, please, go ahead.
I think I could add something more to that, all right. They realized, I'm sure, and we heard indirectly, that they had made a mistake in bringing us there. That was one of the reasons why the recruiters that were sent down, another name for the messengers or whatever it was, they came down to take us in.
Yes.
Had made a gross mistake by taking us in because we were not indoctrinated into the religion.
And that's why they were put in RPF.
That's one of the reasons, I guess, along with everything else. Now, they stayed in their punishment, in other words, lasted as long as I was there, and I think it lasted as long as she was there, and even longer.
But they were there when you were there.
Yeah, they had made a gross mistake by taking us there because we were not into the religion.
All right. One quickie. What kind of movies did L. Ron make? You made movies with him in a desert? Were they epics or...
Well, one was on the e-meter reads, and this was quite interesting too because they had what they called the pinch test.
Pinch?
Yes, you pinch and the meter's supposed to read, and then you're supposed to say, feel that pinch, and the meter's supposed to read again. And you know, everybody on that base was pinched 1 to 10 times before we finally got past the first read.
No feeling left, huh?
I think one of the things that made me realize what a hopeless, helpless operation it was is that I went into the editing room. That was going to be my first job. And when I first got in there, I was shown, amongst other things, the cabinet of film that they had. Now, they had a 2-door cabinet that was probably about that wide and I guess 7 feet tall. That was almost full of film. You know, it's 35 millimeter regular movie-sized film. All the trays were marked no good. Now, this is what made me realize the insanity of L. Ron Hubbard and what he was trying to do. He was the one that was directing the movies. He was the one that was writing the script for them, and he was the one that was producing it. Yet there was his work, all condemned by himself.
Was he acting in them too?
No, I guess not. I know of. Yeah.
He was a star too.
Yeah. But that's what made me realize that the whole place was nothing but a high state of confusion. Each department, instead of working with each other, fought each other, and everything was a terrible, confused mess. But hey, there's the man that was running it.
And one thing I'd like to add, but we were doing a scene where they were bombing the FBI office, and I was in makeup, and we had so much blood on those actors, which is made out of Karo syrup and food coloring, and we couldn't get enough on it to suit Hubbard. We had guys' legs off, their hands off, arms. I mean, it was a mess from where to go. We had so much blood on those actors that they had to take their clothes and all and soak in the shower before they could undress. This is what Hubbard wanted.
Well, this doesn't necessarily relate to the actual Clearwater operation, but I think it relates to the base that we're coming from.
Oh, one other question, if I might ask. Is there any question in your mind that the things you described, not specific details, but the things you described, is there any question in your mind that Mr. Hubbard did not know what was going on?
A lot of things is kept from Hubbard, like the mail. We're supposed to, everybody writes to Hubbard and he answers everybody. He doesn't receive a letter. But anything such as our case and what was going on at the base was run from Hubbard, there's no doubt. There are telexes came, I got in the telex room about twice, which was really heavy guarded. But I did see telexes, England, California, and Clearwater.
Yes, ma'am, but the conditions which the people were living in there and the RPF and all of that, he certainly knew about that.
He knew it and thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Unless you'd like to say one final comment, we thank you very much for being a good witness and then being, you've got a very sad story to tell, and I don't know how you got it out, but you did it very well, and we appreciate you coming.
Yes, thank you.
As a point of information, the movie that Mrs. Hartwell referred to, for whatever it's worth, is a movie that was made during the period that the criminal cases in Washington, D.C. were taking place. And those movies were shown around the United States, and they basically showed that psychiatrists and the FBI and the AMA were criminal organizations, as shown in the movie. And some of the blood scenes that were described were scenes that were supposedly perpetrated by the FBI and the AMA. And those movies are shown around the United States to certain Scientology members. I would now like to introduce a document, and also for the record, as Mr. Hartwell testified, after all of this occurred, a lawsuit was brought against him by the church. And I will leave the reasons for the bringing of the lawsuit to your whatever inferences you may draw after you hear the rest of the testimony. And I would point out the fair game doctrine that was on the easel that we'll put back up had said earlier that the fair game doctrine says lie, cheat, sue, or destroy. And we're now going to introduce an exhibit involving the alleged cancellation of the fair game doctrine as held out by the church.
I've been reading this stuff for 3 years and I just couldn't say a word.
Well, what can you add?
Really? Just the happiness booklet. John, it depends if you're running.
Where is the cameraman?
Not you.
Call for the cameraman, please.
Don't move it. Just don't worry.
Yeah. Let's call the hospital. Mr. Mayor.
He's your job. I told Tom.
Do we have the cameramen present? Will they come to the...
Well, he took a lot of shit, too.
Will they come to the podium here to help us move the camera so we can let the screen down?
You want to recess? Forget it.
You want to recess?
No, don't touch it.
Keep it going. Yeah, Tom's right.
I'll move it. Go ahead. All right.
Do we have the lights turned off, please?
One more.
Thank you. You'll note that the HCO policy letter of 21 October 1968 from the Hubbard Communications Office says cancellation of fair game. The fair game doctrine over on the easel is dated 18 October 1967. The portion under enemy that I referred to a minute ago says that an enemy may be tricked, sued, lied to, or destroyed, as well as deprived of property, etc. This document says cancellation of fair game. The practice of declaring people fair game will cease. fair game may not appear on any ethics order. It causes bad public relations. This PL policy letter does not cancel any policy on the treatment or handling of an SP.
Nicely worded.
But Mr. Flynn, doesn't it say SP order over there, and then says that you can lie, sue, trick, cheat?
That's correct. That's the policy.
So really, this policy did not cancel anything.
Did not,
No,
that's precisely correct. As a matter of fact, see, what was occurring at that time, when they issued ethics orders, they put on the ethics order that the person is subject to fair game. Well, for a period of time, because they were having problems in England and Australia and other countries, they took that off ethics orders, but they continued to implement the policy. And as you've seen from the exhibit we already introduced in evidence, which is exhibit number 4, in 8 June 1979 in this country, they subjected to a person to the Fair Game Declaration, as you have seen. And you just heard the Hartwell testimony. The next witness, that's the prior exhibit number 4, and if you move it up, you will read that that person is subjected to the fair game doctrine down at the bottom of the last paragraph.
Yeah.
And if you move it back down, you'll see the date on it. 8 June 1979.